development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient. This is resilience. We need it in the face of climate change. We need to anticipate climate hazards by strengthening early warning technologies. We must ensure that people in every community, from farms to cities, understand what early actions are needed and have the means to take action to reduce their exposure to climate shocks. We need to absorb these shocks by making sure everyone is protected and has access to services, no matter their economic position, and by expanding insurance for individuals to entire states. We need to reshape development by strengthening our economies, infrastructure, and environment through better choices that account for climate disasters and risks. We all need to anticipate change, absorb the negative, and reshape how we continue to develop. If we can make that a regular part of everyone's life, we can reduce risk and adapt to climate change and become resilient.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It is a great and my distinct pleasure to welcome everyone to this important event as part of the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Action. This is a partnership that has spurred much discussion, much engagement, and mass mobilization of ideas, of innovation, of commitment. And I'm particularly pleased that we will have this very, very distinguished panel this afternoon. As you probably know, the title of this event is Working with Nature to Build Climate Resilient and Sustainable Development. This is the third in a series of events, one that focused on finance, one that focused on small island states, and here we are talking about investing in nature, making sure nature can give us some of the answers to the climate crisis. So on behalf of this broad partnership, it's my distinct pleasure to have the honor of chairing this session this afternoon. We at IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, count many of these brilliant eminences that you will hear from amongst our members, our partners, our colleagues, and our friends. And it's a distinct pleasure to have this event. The Partnership for Environment and Disaster Risk Reduction, which is the platform that is organizing today's event, is a platform of 24 organizations working together to promote ecosystem management for disaster risk and climate change adaptation. And it ranges from United Nations and agencies to research institutions as well as NGOs. And I don't need to tell this audience that climate change is a global problem and that it requires solutions on a global scale. And one of those solutions is hiding in plain sight. We've spent an extraordinary amount of resources to invest in hard infrastructure. We've spent an extraordinary amount of resources cleaning up after terrible natural disasters that are climate-induced. And we've failed to understand that the solution is right there waiting for us to see it. Investing in those forests so they can slow down the winds, protecting the coral reefs so that they will break the waves, ensuring that the mangroves are there to sustain livelihoods and protection, making sure we don't build in floodplains and low-lying areas because that's where the natural breathing of the planet needs to take place. So healthy ecosystems reduce the disaster risk exposure, but healthy ecosystem also reduce poverty. 1 in 10 people with access to forests are lifted out of extreme poverty thanks to forest resources. And climate change, therefore, has to be part and parcel of climate change investments in natural solution, therefore is part and parcel of the overall solution. We will hear today from very eminent speakers about how investing in nature also invests in people and their food security. We will hear about how investing in nature invests in the health of people. We will hear about how investing in nature protects our cities and our infrastructure. We will hear about how investing in nature invests in biodiversity, and we will hear about how investing in nature is, of course, an investment in climate change mitigation. So we are very, very pleased to have this story, this conversation around nature-based solution, a phrase that IUCN has coined and used since 2007 or so, and one that we see more and more picking up everywhere else. We are actually at IUCN mandated now by our latest Congress to work on deeper on the nature-based solution concept. But the concept itself is one that we define as actions to protect, to sustainably manage, and to restore natural and modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, while simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. That is what this conversation today is all about. And I am absolutely honored and delighted to have this extraordinary panel before you. I'd like to first mention, of course, His Excellency Tommy Remengesau, the President of Palau, who has been a tireless spokesperson for the imperative of managing, investing in, and preventing climate change, especially, obviously, for small islands. So we are privileged, deeply privileged, to have you here. I would also like to mention, of course, we have Dr. Jose Graciano da Silva, the Director General of FAO, who has really pushed very hard for the world to understand and take on board the imperative of climate change mitigation and adaptation in the context of the agro and marine ecosystems. We're very, very pleased to have Her Excellency Mrs. Lina Paul, Minister of Environment from El Salvador, who will tell us about the extraordinary efforts and achievements that they have made in El Salvador on fighting drought and climate variability. I'm very, very pleased to also have Mr. Davis Simango, the Mayor of Beira in Mozambique, who will speak to us about urban resilience in an exposed setting. We're also very pleased to have Dr. Breje van Wezenbach, who is from Deltaras, and who will speak about the specificities around coastal and ecozone flood and erosion management. And I'm particularly pleased to have Ms. Suada Ibrahim, who is the Disaster Risk Reduction Manager from the Kenya Red Cross, and she's a representative for the Partners for Resilience Alliance. And she will speak to us about disaster risks and the opportunities as well as the challenges that entails. And not to miss, but we ran out of chairs, Mr. Manish Babna, who is the Executive Vice President and Managing Director from the World Resources Institute, who will speak to us about the very important finance for green infrastructure. We are going to run this Davos style, I was told, so I invite everyone to do the speeches from seated, if I may. We'll have about 5 minutes each, and I should say that Dr. Da Silva has an urgent, he's double or triple booked at least, and you can well imagine why. So we will quite understand that you need to leave shortly after your intervention. And the same goes for His Excellency, Mr. President Remengesau, who will stay with us a little while longer, but not the full session. Can you give this brilliant panel a round of applause at this point, and then we'll hand over. So as I see, we seem to have microphones by the seating. We may have to pass them up and down a little bit, so maybe if I could ask for a microphone coming down my way. And then, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to hand over to President Remengesau. And President Remengesau, the importance of investing in green infrastructure, especially in small islands, developing states, is clearly something that you've spoken about on many global platforms and something you hold very dear. Can you speak to us about this, particularly any experiences in your countries and other small islands? Why is that so important, and what needs to happen? Over to you, sir.
Sylvia, sorry, I forgot the key word. Is the green?
Indeed, the story is about one of investing in nature so that nature can protect islands, especially low-lying islands. And Hugh, can you please bring me a handheld?
Yes, so thank you, Sylvie. And first of all, it's very good to be here in the company of people who are friends and children of the ocean and understands that the biggest impact of climate change for small island developing states is really on the green infrastructure and on the blue infrastructure of small island nations. But if I may begin, we all know that the islands altogether contribute approximately 1% of the gas emissions to the air. So we're not contributors of the climate change phenomenon. However, we receive the biggest impact to it. But even with that situation, it's very important that the islands pursue a green infrastructure with the rest of the world. And so for small island nations like Palau, we have made very ambitious targets. For example, we are targeted to achieve a renewable energy source output of 45% by 2025. And we are conscious of the fact that 99% of the time on the tropical islands, it's sunny. And so there's quite a lot of solar opportunities out there that needs to be taken care of. So with this target, we are certainly working with the private sectors, with the right technology, and with the right funding mechanism to truly make the islands the green place to live in like it should. We also have started working with our national development banks in areas where if you give loans to our people, they get very low interest rates of their home loans with the idea that you push together this renewable energy concept for every household. In addition to this, we are doing some solarizing of rooftops for government buildings especially, and private companies that sign on to these solarization projects in the community. We definitely, you may be surprised to find out that on the islands we have drought, despite the fact that we have tropical rainfall every year. And so we have to stop relying on dams, but also to dig wells to make sure that there is enough supply of water system during what we now becoming very common, which is El Nino and Nino seasons. So there is a lot of, innovative ways that one can do. But when it comes to technology, efficiency, and expediency, this is what we hope that international partners and agencies can work together to achieve a greener future for the islands.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. President. So one thing is obviously that you're investing in, as you rightly say, you are not the big emitter here. You are the one that is living the impacts of the big emissions. Do you find that there are other ways that you could look at coastal protection by working with nature? Are there other ways that you've thought about that through natural forests or coastal setbacks, or things of this nature? Or is it simply that the land is so small that there's simply not an opportunity to protect that infrastructure already? Any thoughts that you have on this?
Yes, and so our guiding philosophy has always been that the economy is the environment and the environment is the economy, and that you cannot really separate the two. Today, all of these, we have identified nature-based solutions that are really not the new concept for Palau, because we have been practicing them for over the years through our culture and traditions. And science has come in and actually looked into those practices and says, yes, this works. This can help sustain your marine resources and provide resiliency to the impact of climate change. So, for instance, today our ocean is making us take a very dramatic step of protecting 80% of our total water territory, and we have conserved 80% of that. It's not just a marine sanctuary, but it's a no-take zone. And that's about 165 square miles, or roughly 666 100,000 square kilometers, the size of France, I would always say. It's an area that we feel it's going to do a lot for the resiliency, the factor that needs to be there. Science have come in and said, if you protect that much area, there is also the spillover benefits that can carry on to other regions in our part of the world. This is very important because people tend to think of a marine protected area as only benefiting whatever size that you designate. The truth of the matter is that the protected area will be responsible for the spillover or the refurnishment or the repopulation of other areas that we are actually allowed to fish in or to take resources from. So we feel that this is something that every nation should commit. As you know, through the United Nations, by the year 2030, everyone has made that commitment to be at least 10% marine protected area designate. But we need to do this as a whole global community.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Let's give His Excellency the President a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Economy is our environment, environment is our economy. Director General, that leads us straight to sort of how we live, how we eat, how we define our lives in a climate-changing world. The whole agro economy, the agro-marine ecosystems. How are we going to, as climate change is happening, how do we deal with climate-resilient agro-ecosystems and marine ecosystems? And what's the work that FAO is doing at this? And what are the lessons that you're learning? And what should we learn from you? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'll step on what my dear friend Tommy just said. He spoke about protecting. These are the first and one of the most important areas of action to preserve natural ecosystems. And there are two others very important. That is basically what FAO does to sustainable manage the ecosystems. And the third is to restore the degraded system. So would be ideal if we could only protect, if the world was not, the nature was not damaged as it is now, but unfortunately it's not. So we need to act on these two areas, sustainable manage and restore. Sustainable manage, what we do, there's a lot of new systems of production that produce equal productivity, give us equal results from the economic point of view that are much more sustainable. Let's talk about agroecology, for example, replacing the intensive use of chemicals in the food production. This is just one. Not to tell about organic agriculture and many other forms that we can do to intensify production in a sustainable way. Another example using that, instead of using the traditional systems of irrigation, that's basically inundation, like the Egypt did 3,000 years ago, we can do now this drip irrigation, or goutte-à-goutte. And we use 1,000% less water than the first system and preserve fresh water. That's becoming more and more scarce. Nowadays, in FAO, we know that the conflicts for water is growing in a way that we already have now more conflicts for fresh water than for land. Land used to be the biggest conflict during the 60s, 70s, last century. Now is water. And water is becoming more scarce. The seeds are a good example of that. And we are talking not water for irrigation. We're talking about drinking water to survive. So this is the way that we can, and we do have now, new technologies that we can manage in a sustainable way to produce more with better results without damaging the environment. But most important, we need to restore those degraded systems. And one particular aspect on this restoring degraded system is livestock. We estimate that from 2/3 to 3/4 of the pasture in the world are degraded land nowadays. So to feed a cow, for example, we need 1 hectare in a degraded pasture land. And this is the rule in all Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia also. 3/4 down to 2/3. This fantastic numbers of hectares that could be producing much more. How we do that? How we can intensify the livestock production and be much more resilient and low carbon, not emitting so many gas effect. Basically, rotation. Rotation is a very simple practice. You have a pasture during 5-6 years, then you use it for a crop production. And you benefit from all the manure that was deposited there during the time of pasture, and then you come back to pasture. Or use systems of intensification, like the Voisin system, for example, that you use small piece of land with a big number of cattle, basically cattle, that you rotate the herbs along the same land in small pieces. So the cows eat all the grass available in a short space, 1 day or 2 days, move to another one or 2 days, etc. Then they rotate back. This was the system that is a French invention, André Voisin, but it was adopted by Fidel Castro in Cuba, the time to face all the import restriction he had to have milk available in the island. So these are typical practices that are known a long time ago, and we could implement it to restore those degraded systems and with very good results for the environment. So basically, what we need to do and what we do in FAO, we need to do more, is this: to restore degraded system and find ways to manage the systems in a sustainable way.
This is beautiful. Thank you very much. Just so protect, restore, sustainably manage and restore. That's the takeaway message that the Director General is leaving us with, and he is double booked. So let me just ask you one quick question, if I may, and that would be, so these systems that maybe were known, of course not maybe drip irrigation, but all the systems that we knew in the past that somehow have been lost and that we now can see that they had wisdom in them. Why do you think they were lost, and what do we need to do to expedite the uptake of these enhanced practices? Because clearly less chemicals, okay, drip irrigation, there's an infrastructure investment, I understand, but enhanced shifting agriculture that you describe. What is it that stopped it, and what do we need to amp it up, so to speak? Over to you.
Well, I'm not only talking about recovering old practices. No. Of course, there is a lot to preserve and to adapt from those old systems of production. And that knowledge, traditional knowledge, can be very useful for our future, no doubt of that. Indigenous agriculture, for example, are showing us how to produce in the tropical areas in a sustainable way nowadays. But what happens is that in the 50s and 60s, we had this green revolution. The green revolution promoted really a revolution on agricultural practice, changed completely the way we produce, using inputs from outside the farm to increase farm production. This was the way we avoid a big hunger in the 60s, 70s, last century. So I am not blaming the Green Revolution. Just I'm saying that it comes to exhaust the cycle of the use of chemicals and the damage that it's collaterally provoking in the nature need to be revisited. So nowadays we need a double green revolution, let's say, and to use other practices that can reduce the use of inputs, reduce the use of machinery, and be equally efficient. I'll tell you something that will probably surprise you. 85% of the soybeans nowadays in Latin America, that's the main exporters of soybean. I'm talking about Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, that replaced US and Canada as the major exporters of soybeans. They use a new technique that's this minimum plug. We don't use the traditional system to, let's say, we don't hurt the soil anymore. We don't, there is a technical name. I cannot remember the name now. But we minimize the use of the plug and grade to revolve the soil. These in tropical areas are key because the origin of that use in non-tropical areas was to accelerate defreezing the soil. Makes no sense to use a machinery that was used to defreeze the soil in tropical areas that never freeze the soil. On the opposite, we have heavy rains, and when we expose the land, the rainfall, torrential rainfall, can devastate and take all the, let's say, productive land in a few hours. So this use nowadays is not for a pilot experiment. It's 80% of the area of soybean production in Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina. That's the most important area of soybean of the world is under this minimum cultivation system.
That's super.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. No, can we please give the Director General a round of applause? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very, very much indeed. We really appreciate your time here. Now, careful getting down those. I have a bad knee, so I don't want you to get one either. Thank you very much indeed. So we had really interesting interventions by both His Excellency the President as well as the Director General of FAO. And what I'd like to do now is to go to El Salvador. And I would like to hear from Her Excellency Minister Paul. El Salvador is this interesting country, and you have done a lot in terms of minimizing drought and ensuring that climate variability can somehow be leveled out so that you don't have these ups and downs in terms of environmental instability in a number of sub-regions in that dry corridor. And Madam Minister, we're really interested in hearing, how did you invest in nature and how did that really work? And what were the lessons and even the challenges, if you like? Over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in Spanish. So if you don't have the microphone. Yes, thank you. And I'm going to use some slides. So if you let me, Inga, I'm going to. Thank you. Bueno, muchísimas gracias y muchas gracias por la invitación. Yo creo que, y siguiendo a mis antecesores, efectivamente no se puede dejar de trabajar con la naturaleza. No se puede dejar de avanzar en este tema de infraestructura verde. Déjenme contarles quiénes somos. Centroamérica es un área que ha sido identificada por el último informe del Panel Intergubernamental para el Cambio Climático como la región del trópico más sensible a los efectos del cambio climático. Y como dijo el señor presidente de Palau, no somos los responsables del cambio climático, pero somos quienes más padecemos los efectos del cambio climático. Y es por la posición en la que estamos. No somos islas, pero tenemos los dos océanos que nos están afectando e impactando. Y eso significa mucho. Además, hay actividades enormes en términos de agricultura que están impactadas por el clima. Imagínense que en El Salvador, por ejemplo, mi país, 3/4 partes del uso del suelo es agrícola. Entonces, lo que pase ahí y la resiliencia que se haga en esta área es fundamental. Además, hay un inadecuado manejo de suelo, agua y prácticas insostenibles, que ya vimos, prácticas que dejamos de hacer. Encima, ven ahí el recorrido de la mayoría de los huracanes, sistemas que nos afectan a nosotros y que, sobre todo a partir de la década de los 80, esto se vio intensificado. Y estos son los efectos de estos eventos asociados. Hemos tenido varios años, inundaciones, gran cantidad de inundaciones, pero también gran cantidad de sequías. Y encima, nuestro patrón de lluvias está cambiando. O sea, el patrón tradicional del cual dependen los cultivos del país se ha transformado, es otro. Y esto significa, y fíjese, son todos los países de Centroamérica, enormes impactos en términos de sequía. Tanto es así que ya tenemos un corredor en Centroamérica que es conocido como el corredor seco, y en donde hay pérdidas enormes. Solo para decirles, en el último estudio que hicimos en El Salvador, nosotros cada año perdemos el 4% del Producto Interno Bruto. El 4%. Y cada año perdemos el 60% de lo que invertimos en infraestructura. El 60% de lo que invertimos en infraestructura lo perdemos por efecto de estos eventos extremos. Este es el corredor seco donde concentra el 90% de la población de toda Centroamérica, predominantemente agrícola y con cultivos no tradicionales. Y si uno ve los impactos que esto tiene en términos de las aguas subterráneas, de la disposición, incluso de la productividad de los principales cultivos del país, del incremento de los incendios forestales, realmente es una situación terrible. Nosotros, y coincidimos con Graciano, aquí de lo que se trata no es de proteger, porque mucha de esta tierra está ya degradada. Nosotros dijimos, son 3 cosas las que tenemos que hacer. Claro que hay que conservar y proteger lo que tenemos, pero sobre todo hay que restaurar. Y hay que restaurar las áreas altamente degradadas. Y lo que construimos fue un trabajo muy importante para nosotros en términos de hacer esos ecosistemas más resilientes. Y primero tuvimos que construir un mapa de uso de suelo y una tecnología que utilizamos, que es tecnología LIDAR. El Salvador, bueno, en realidad son 21.000 kilómetros cuadrados y esto es posible. En El Salvador somos el único país que tenemos imágenes con tecnología LIDAR de una resolución de 1 en 1000. Eso es altísima resolución que nosotros tenemos de todo el territorio nacional. Yo siempre digo que ahí descubrí que mi marido me engañaba de tanta resolución que había y por eso me divorcié. Tenemos este mapa de uso de suelos del país. Pero ¿para qué nos sirve el mapa de uso de suelos? Bueno, lo que hicimos nosotros con este mapa de uso de suelos es definir las áreas prioritarias a restaurar bajo diferentes criterios, que son los criterios que nos permiten a nosotros adaptarnos a las condiciones de cambio climático. Dijimos Queremos agua, obviamente. Queremos conservar suelos para la agricultura. Claro que sí, la seguridad alimentaria es un tema fundamental del país. Queremos adaptarnos en todo el término de inundaciones, tormentas. Queremos biodiversidad, regular el clima y queremos leña. Y sobre todo en aquellos lugares donde la leña es muy importante. Lo hicimos incluso con resolución a nivel de municipios de cada uno de los lugares del país. ¿Por qué? Porque construir infraestructura verde es caro. O sea, no es cierto que esto sea fácil, esto es caro. Y un país pobre como el nuestro, con mecanismos climáticos no tan ágiles para llegar a los países que realmente lo necesitan, por eso estamos luchando aquí, países como los nuestros, entonces necesitamos priorizar. Esos mapas nos permiten a nosotros, y esto es un trabajo extraordinario que yo siempre agradezco a UICN, por su ayuda, tenemos esta información donde nosotros podemos priorizar. Tenemos incluso los costos de la restauración. ¿Cuáles son aquellos lugares donde nosotros tenemos que dar incentivos porque resulta que no vamos a tener un retorno próximo? ¿Y cuáles son aquellos lugares donde invertir en naturaleza genera impactos positivos? Y no solo eso, quisimos buscar socios. Esto es importante porque necesitamos socios en el país para este proceso. Entonces hicimos los mapas para definir aquellos activos fundamentales. Y estoy hablando de infraestructura gris. Aquellos activos fundamentales que deben ser preservados, pero que no pueden preservarse si no hay una inversión en infraestructura verde, en naturaleza. Y entonces lo ligamos y dijimos, si usted quiere proteger los principales puertos del país, si usted quiere proteger las plantas potabilizadoras de agua potable, si usted quiere proteger las presas para producir energía hidroeléctrica, usted tiene que invertir en naturaleza. Y es ahí donde van a invertir y tenemos los mapas donde define cuáles son el control de la erosión que provoca eso, cuáles son los sedimentos que se dejan de transportar si usted invierte en naturaleza. Claro que nosotros tenemos un sistema de monitoreo robusto también, debemos tener un sistema de monitoreo robusto, tenemos un sistema de monitoreo para sequía para todo el país y tenemos además este programa de restauración de ecosistemas y paisajes que supone agua, energía, tierra, reducción de riesgos. ¿Cómo hicimos esto? Involucrando a la gente. Socios que pueden incorporarse en esto, pero entendiendo que invertir en naturaleza significa invertir en la gente. Si la gente ve los beneficios de esa inversión, entonces los procesos pueden ser sostenibles. Nosotros nos hemos puesto la meta de restaurar la mitad del país. Y a mí me dicen siempre, vaya, qué ambiciosa esta ministra. En realidad es que no es ambicioso, es que si no lo hacemos, no logramos un desarrollo sustentable del país y ni siquiera eso, no logramos superar las recurrentes pérdidas y daños que el cambio climático genera en nuestro país y que del cual nos tenemos que hacer lamentablemente responsables nosotros, porque quienes son los responsables no necesariamente son quienes ayudan a evitar esto. Muchas gracias.
Bravo, Madam Minister. This was a tour de force, and it was really brilliant because it put us right in the center of what you have done, which is an extraordinary, extraordinary piece of analytical work, mobilization work, investment work. So, let me play the devil's advocate for a moment. So, other countries may be, I'm not saying El Salvador, but maybe the environment minister is where the minister of finance gives the last dollar. First dollar goes to infrastructure, second dollar goes to health, third dollar goes to agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, when they say, okay, what do I have left? Okay, that goes to environment. And not in El Salvador, I'm sure. However, what advice would you have? And how did you manage how did you use this to persuade the imperative of investing in nature? Over to you, madam.
Yo creo que eso ha sido lo más difícil. Invertir en naturaleza, o como decía el presidente de Palau, ojalá todos los presidentes fueran como él, no necesariamente relacionan economía con medio ambiente. Medio ambiente dejó de ser ya un tema de arbolitos y pájaros y estas cosas románticas. No, medio ambiente es economía, efectivamente. Y nosotros lo que hicimos fue demostrar que las pérdidas económicas recurrentes es por no invertir en naturaleza, por no construir resiliencia climática basada en trabajar con la naturaleza. Y por eso tuvimos que centrarnos en definir los activos más importantes del país, el riesgo que tienen esos activos, las pérdidas económicas de esos activos y cómo invertir en naturaleza significa blindar la infraestructura gris que no van a dejar de construir. Ojalá algún día lo hicieran de otra forma, pero no van a dejar de hacerlo. El ministro de Agricultura de mi país, por ejemplo, cuando inicia su gestión, recién empieza, tuvo la sequía más fuerte de toda la historia de El Salvador. 32 días secos consecutivos, se perdió toda la cosecha. Yeah. Entonces él entiende que bueno, invertir en naturaleza, cambiar los modos de producción, cambiar esas formas, significa para ellos mejorar su economía.
This is fantastic and very, very interesting. Can we please give the minister a round of applause? That was super. Really interesting. And so now we're going to go across the Atlantic and all the way to Mozambique and to hear from the mayor of Beira, Mr. Davis Simango, who is going to share with us about investing and working with nature for resilience, working with nature for resilience in an urban setting. So, Mr. Mayor, over to you.
Thank you.
And I should remind, we have 5 minutes.
I'm also going to lose some slides, please. Okay, I'll try to introduce you Mozambique, particularly the city of Beira, which has about 600,000 inhabitants. Our mission as municipality is to improve the quality of life, to create an attractive environment for investment and jobs, ensure quality of urban planning. We came up with a master plan 2015 up to 2035, where we have a lot of integrated projects, as you can see in the slides. We have a serious problem of erosion. You can see the top slides are showing the buildings, how damaged are they, and the challenge we have to face and protect. The next slide shows how we do the break waves. We can do them by stones, we can do them by prefabricated, we can also make them in the site, but most of the stone comes from 130 km from the center of the city. The following slide shows what happened along the beach. The road which you are seeing here there is not working anymore. Much after repairing, after investing, you can see what happened, and it becomes a tourist place. Flooding is another problem, inundations. When we have high tide, usually we have heavy rains. And because the city of Beira is connected by channels, it means that when we have heavy rains, we need to wait until the low tide so that we can take the water from the land to the sea. We made a lot of studies to know exactly which are the dangerous areas inside the city where people are not allowed to build. As you can see in this map, the red one shows that exactly the dangerous place we are not allowed to see. You can see another slide, how raining season, how flooding takes place in my city. We made a drainage map, which is very important. We're working with the World Bank in this. We have the retained basins so that when we have heavy rain, we can keep water in a while we are waiting for the low waves so that we can push the water to the sea. We made a map of certain control so that we can make a control of the water in the channels to avoid us from flooding. As you can see, we have 6 control and the central control. It means that however it rains, we know even at home by remote control, by cell phone, we can control and close all the water gates in the city. This is the system master control system, station, transmission by wireless and ADOS. I'll talk a little bit about Chiveve River, which we started 2018. This river was closed in the early 70s. It brought degradation of the tidal river, limited natural drainage function, which was a very high risk of flooding, high level of pollution because of solid waste management. People were putting solid management there, and also open defecation, high risk of contamination because of the soil. And you can see after that, we started working. Here we are digging to open the channel. So we increased from 61 our capacity to up to 247,000 cubic meter. Here we're building the water gates. So now you can see the top, how it was before and how it is now. So it means that we increase a lot the life of the city. It means that all water, neighbor water, can come and stay in these basins. You can see how the river is now. February 2016. The function of the river is to close the dam, to release the water during the low tide, large water retention, flooding plains, and other things. Now we're working in the Grand Infrastructure Park, which is coming soon. As you can see, the market on the left side. In this Grand Park, we are going to combine the economic and social needs, because we have a lot of families selling in the street, looking for business. So what we did is, okay, let's come with restaurants so that people can work in the restaurant, get money, and with those revenue of all these infrastructures can support the structure of maintenance of the Green Infrastructure Park. You can see how the drawing will be, because we're going to have protect the ecosystems, to improve the ecosystem-based adaptations, flooding and storm protection, pollution of air, water, and soil, balancing the temperature in the center of the city, as well employment, recreation, safety, health, and education. So we expect that after all what we are doing, we're going to drive the economic and social development, creation opportunity for jobs, the quality urban planning, the investment opportunity for private sector, and preparing the partnership, private and public. So thanks for all.
Bravo, wonderful, thank you. That's absolutely impressive. And so let me ask you, because this is massive what you've done and total turnaround. So again, not your city, but maybe in another city. The issue of illegal settlements, or maybe even corrupt building in no-go area that you want to restore for that natural use. You said, you had on these maps sort of areas where people were not allowed to build. Have you found that illegal encroachment or even other sort of illegal that would cause you these excellent plans not to succeed? And because the idea, I suppose, is how do you enforce those regulations? I think you just move the little button up and then you will get there. But otherwise, I'll give you mine. Okay. So how do you enforce these regulations, and how do you prevent either, I'm sure people, but in my particular city, the enforcement agency is weak, or there's a corrupt politician, or something, and it's hard. So how do you deal with that, Mr. Mayor? Because this is brilliant. Over to you.
What we did in our city, we have a local law which protects the area which are not allowed to build. Mm. And another thing, because we are under sea level, we need to reclaim the land so that people can build safety. Most of the people, what they're doing now, they can build, but not a safety way. And when it comes to raining season, they get cholera, flooding, and malaria. So we came up with a very new project, which is the Land Development Company, We are dredging the channel to the port access. We take those materials, we pump them to outside, which is sand. We reclaim the land. We do the public infrastructures. I'm talking about roads, water net, power net, sewage system, and drainage system. And we say to people, okay, the land is ready. Now you can build in a safety way. So this is the way how we can protect our city against informal settlement. Yeah. And another thing is, we are talking to the people who are living in the former settlements. It's okay, now you have to move from this place to the new place, because there you have all public infrastructures, you have school and hospital. So that's the way how to support and help the people.
Very good. Many, many thanks. I mean, I think we saw an excellent example of how to restore and reclaim nature, opening the river, dredging it, etc. So give a round of applause, will you please, to the Mayor of Beira. I am aware that His Excellency President Remengesau needs to leave us now, so I would like to thank you very much, sir, for this, and wish you all the very best. Thank you very much. And may I invite, please, our colleague Manish Babna to come up, and you get the honorable seat in the middle. How about that, for having been so patient? So thank you very, very much indeed for staying with us. We're now going to go and hear from Dr. Brejna van Wessenbeck, who's going to speak to us about some of the solutions around coastal erosions and coastal and flood management. So over to you, please, Brejna.
Thank you very much, Inger. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm only a humble researcher in this panel of officials. I also always am the humble researcher who is throwing in the controversial opinions, maybe. So it's good to speak for a room of nature-based solutions believers, but maybe the challenges are not here in this room then. And it was already mentioned by the Minister of El Salvador. She said sometimes others think that nature is just like this romantic thing, right? We tend to believe that maybe everybody knows that ecosystems provide services, what is the importance of biodiversity. But I'm also based, for example, at the Delft University of Technology at the Department of Civil Engineering. And I recently had a chat with a student where I said somewhere in the middle of the conversation, I said, so everybody knows the value of biodiversity. And I met a completely blank face, which I found rather interesting. And I said, we all know that, right? And he admitted he didn't know. He didn't have a clue what biodiversity was important for. So I said to him, well, maybe the food you eat, the clothes you wear, and the medicine you take. But to me, it meant that I realized there's a lot of people that doesn't know what biodiversity is important for. And those are the people that maybe are coastal managers in the future or are water resource managers. So we need to start speaking their language, I realized. And this guy, he will understand language that talks about performance indicators, about evaluation metrics, and about long-term uncertainties of infrastructure. So I think that's a challenge for us as conservationists and ecologists to sort of start speaking this other language and reach out. And then I think the other challenge also is the proof of the pudding, right? I mean, it's kind of easy to sit here and to talk about how great nature-based solutions are. But I think decision makers, and also me as a scientist, I mean, I was in Kiribati recently and I was standing in this outer island, and then this community asked for a seawall. And I was gonna give them a reef management program. And then, I mean, that's the proof of the pudding. I mean, I was sort of doubting, can I really give them a reef management program? Will these people be sort of safe? Aren't we making them more vulnerable this way? Or are we making them more vulnerable by construction of a seawall that won't hold up? I mean, I think those are questions that we need to answer and that we need to be realistic about, right? And do we know enough to give those people ecosystems instead of hard infrastructure solutions? And then another point for me is if I look around in the world and I see how nature-based solutions are often implemented, I think we're not there yet. There's many ecosystems, there's many coastal ecosystems, for example, but the projects I met are often mangrove planting, and mangrove planting. So I think we have a whole portfolio out there that we're not yet using. And then I wonder, do we know how to use it very well? So also with the mangrove planting, it goes, does it really help to increase resilience of people? Or do we maybe plant mangroves? I think that in the Philippines, like only 10% of the plantings actually survives. So sometimes they plant them in seagrass beds and then they impact other ecosystems. So those plantings may make people more vulnerable and not protect them. So I'm actually advertising for science-based implementation. I mean, there's a lot of science out there on ecosystem management. And I really loved what the FAO director said about protect, do sustainable management, and restore. I mean, that's the basis. And that's also the basis that we put in this guideline. We had, I think, over 25 organizations and over 17 people, and we made this very small guideline, which is implementation of nature-based flood protection. It will be out and on the World Bank webpage, hopefully very soon. I have 6 copies, so if you think you will benefit most from it, you can come and get the version already. Otherwise, the link will be out soon and you can get it online. And this, I think the strength of this guideline is maybe in collaboration. So sometimes it's time, I think we have to, with the nature-based field, we have to battle hundreds of years of conventional engineering. And we have to sort of catch up in knowledge, right? What we know about ecosystems. And we cannot do that by ourselves. We cannot do that as a single research institute. So we need to build strategic alliances, and we need to sort of accelerate knowledge development in this field. So what we try to do a little bit is set aside our ego and try to make a guideline that is a collaborative effort between conservationists, engineers, contractors, risk managers, and financing institutions. And we will revise this guideline, I think, in a year, and you're all invited to contribute and participate if you want to. So collaboration between different disciplines, that's for me another key issue. And then in the end, what I wanted to say is, if we talk about sustainable management, I know that a call for action is nice, right? And then it's nice to plant a tree, make a picture of it, have the picture in a newspaper. But on the other hand, there's this whole suite of things that we know we can do that is way more effective. So if you do go for planting a tree, please also go for all those effective measures that do not make you so popular, which is a proper water resource management plan, stopping pollution of coastal waters. So for coral reefs, for example, restoration projects that put in like concrete, right? They're all on-the-spot measurements. But if we manage to improve water quality in coastal waters, that may benefit coral reefs on a really large scale. Same goes. So please, I know it's more difficult to do because it's institutionally often difficult, right. But please try to do this and make a difference there. Implement integrated water resource management, integrated coastal zone management. That will really help and pay off.
Fantastic. This is super interesting, and I think you have here, and certainly on the panel, not sort of starry-eyed conservationists, but you actually have hardcore people who are doing the stuff and who very much believe in the science. So I'm going to push you a little bit on that, because why is it, do you think, that what is it that has made us not have these sectors speak to one another? Because, you know, I mean, I come from Denmark. I live, our house is very close to what we call a plantation, but it was planted in 1600. We still refer to it as a plantation to protect us from coastal sand, from erosion. And so the plantation is now a wild forest, obviously. But anyway, my point is, this is not new. I mean, people knew in 1600 in Denmark that they needed to plant this thing. So, and I'm sure communities, so what happened? And how do we, it's a little bit what I asked, and I don't want to be naive, because I'm very much aware that there is engineering solutions that need to go along with this. But why is it that we've separated these two? And you speak to the engineering student who doesn't, so what's failing? What's broken down? Over to you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I think so. Where it relates to, for example, in the Netherlands, we manage our beach and dune system as our natural defense against coastal flooding, and we do that by engineers doing that for really long already, and they actually are adaptively learning how to better manage it. And now recently, there's been made a link to ecologists also, and I think what is sort of happening is that by now, because we've been monitoring the system for so long, there's more trust right now in its functioning. And more trust also means that they start to have the trust to manage it more adaptively. So right now, they're allowing for more natural dynamics again. And I think, yeah, why we are not talking, it's such a different discipline. So I think many colleges also, they focus on such a different field of science. And I think if you bridge, there's a lot to gain, right?
Absolutely. Look, this is fascinating conversation. Can we give Dr. Berje van Messenbeck a round of applause, please? Now we're going to sort of shift gear a little bit, because we're going to hear from Ms. Suada Ibrahim, who, as I mentioned, is a disaster risk reduction manager with Kenya Red Cross. And here, you know, she lives in this, in the crosshairs, if I may say, of disaster and climate risk and how that impacts local communities. And we're really interesting to understand from you the experiences as well as the opportunities and challenges that communities face when they are faced with disaster and how we reduce that risk. And you've had a lot of experiences from Kenya. So over to you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say I'm also honored to be in this panel, coming from the Red Cross and speaking about nature-based solutions. Yeah, so I'm happy to be here. Just a little background on Kenya. Kenya is a country that is faced with climate change, and currently hydromet hazards are the most frequent disasters that we face. From last quarter of last year in 2016, we were talking about drought to this year. And currently, back home, it's the communities are now being faced by floods. So we're coming from drought to floods between every 2 years in Kenya. For Kenya, in terms of climate and disaster risk governance, the Constitution of Kenya has created an enabling environment whereby we have made strides in different policies that we have developed in Kenya in terms of like the climate response strategy, the Climate Change Act, the National Climate Change Action Plan. So there are a lot of legislation that supports climate issues. Same for the environment. We have the Water Act, we have the Environment and Management Coordination Act that all speak about how we need to engage in terms of like environmental issues. But the challenge in Kenya that we're facing right now is that we do not have a disaster risk management policy. And this is a huge gap for the country. For the last decade, it's been in draft form, and I think mainly for political reasons that it's been challenging to come up with a disaster risk management policy. However, there are many opportunities with the country now being devolved. We have 47 counties, and the decentralization of decision-making and resources now that are going to the local communities is a great opportunity for the country. So in the aspect of enhancing environment management or ecosystem management and restoration in disaster and climate change adaptation at the subnational level, I would say that we are faced with different challenges. I think it's already been shared that how people are working in their sectors. We have agriculture focusing, of course, on agricultural issues. We have water, but and they all have policies that guide them. And these policies, they don't speak to one another. So that is one of the challenges that we're having in Kenya in terms of coordinated policies that are good, but they're not speaking or feeding into each other. Of course, another challenge is that of finance. Even though we have policies, some of these policies are not being implemented because of financial issues, how government budgets are being allocated. So some very good ideas around how to integrate environmental issues are not happening again because of financial allocation. There are many priorities. You would say, for example, I want to give an example, like even from the community level, when we are doing participatory risk assessments at the community, and we are discussing with them risks and vulnerabilities, of course, and we're asking them to prioritize their needs, the first thing that will come up will be food and water, of course, the basics. And then issues, for example, like around environment will be ranked last by the community. So they do not see the connection between the environment and issues, for example, like food and water. So environment is ranked last. So this is not only at the community level, it even happens with our policy makers. So at the county government level, you would find like we have policymakers meeting to discuss or develop disaster risk management policies, but they're not even thinking about environment being included in the policies. So we saw an opportunity, the Red Cross working together with other partners through a program called Partners for Resilience that is being funded by the Netherlands government on an approach that is called integrated risk management, where it brings humanitarians like the Red Cross, working with environment organizations like Wetlands International, working with CodeAid. So bringing practitioners from humanitarian, environment, and also the development domain to discuss integrated risk management. And so we are working, building the capacity of civil society organizations from the local level to understand the approach of integrated risk management and how such an approach can influence policy and legislation at the local level to ensure that ecosystem management and restoration is actually factored in. Because when we go on the ground to try and talk about reducing disaster risks, and we are talking about promoting livelihood and food security, and we do not factor in environment restoration, then of course the food security issues will not be sustainable. Communities will continue to degrade land, to open up new spaces for agriculture while not factoring the environment. So through this integrated risk management approach, we are working with county and national government to try and build capacity to see how it can be integrated, because there's an opportunity. The counties are now developing their policies on climate, on disaster, and therefore we're using this approach to discuss environment issues. Yeah.
This is fabulous, super interesting, and I think you're telling us that this bridge between the humanitarian community on the one side and the environment slash, I want to say, including engineered solutions, community on the other, they need to talk together. So you've managed to, through this good work in Kenya, create that bridge and hopefully enhance the community's understanding of the link between their priorities, food and water, and the story around healthy ecosystems. What would be your advice then to the global community where that conversation needs to happen, right? We have the great organizations that deals with conservation and so on, and we have great organizations that deal with humanitarian. How do you make them talk together? What's missing?
That's a very good question. It seems at the community level, integration is not really as challenging. It is at a global level. So I don't have an exact answer to that, how it can be taken up or scaled up at the global level. But I think such kind of forums where practitioners sit together and discuss on how these issues can be integrated better across and be mainstream across their different policies is one way of pushing such an agenda. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. It is about listening to from the ground up, and that's exactly what you're doing. Can we give Ms. Suada Ibrahim a round of applause? Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I have to say, Manish, you've been very patient. But you're coming with an important story to tell us here, because all of this will only come together if we have the money to pay for it all. And so how are we gonna make this whole green finance story come to pass? Because it seems that it's difficult, and yet we've heard some brilliant examples of why it's actually absolutely imperative. So What are the opportunities and the challenges for green finance and green infrastructure? Can you tell us some about some of the research and some of the great work that you've been doing at WRI? Over to you.
No, great. Delighted. Thank you, Inger. Real privilege to be here with all of you today. So I thought I would pick up on the point about forest landscape restoration. It's come up by the minister. It came up by Jose Graziano at FAO. And it's a very interesting, when you think about forest landscape restoration, you have this wonderful opportunity to invest in something that has significant benefits around adaptation or building resilience. You sequester carbon, so there's a big mitigation benefit. And you're making land and water more productive. There's a strong economic benefit. So you would think that something like this would be a perfect opportunity to raise both public and private funding, right? But it's not that easy. We have had, working with IUCN and many others over the past few years, trying to generate commitments for countries to restore degraded forest and agricultural land. The way that Ecuador has, El Salvador has done quite recently. But how you translate those commitments to actual implementation requires money. And we know that there's a challenge, both there is a scarcity of public money, not enough for the scale of what we need to do, but crowding in or securing private money is actually quite difficult. About 4 or 5 days ago, we actually had an event here at the COP where we announced that we had brought in $2.1 billion from impact investors, private financial players to support landscape restoration in Latin America, something, again, that we did with IUCN. And that was incredibly exciting, but only still a small fraction of that money that has been earmarked for restoration has actually gone into actual deals. So what have we learned from this process? And I think I just wanted to share a little bit why is this difficult? What are some of the challenges? At a very high level, the financial system is designed to support big, gray infrastructure, bricks and mortar stuff that they know how to fund. What it is not yet designed to do is to fund kind of small green infrastructure. And so there is both the challenge of helping the investors, the financial system, get much more comfortable about what these types of projects are. They're inherently risk averse. They don't understand how to do this, and so they shy away from this. On the other hand, when you look at project developers, those that have restoration projects, flood protection projects, mangrove projects, oftentimes they will put projects to the Green Climate Fund, to impact investors, to private financial players, and the response is, these are not investment ready, right? Nice idea, but you're not serious. You haven't really done the due diligence you need to do to get this funded. And so the real challenge here is how we work on both sides. We have to work with the financial system to get them to better understand what these types of investments are, but we also have to work with developers, build their capacity to develop more investment-ready projects. So I think our role as a community is in part to de-risk these investments in the eyes of investors, to matchmake supply and demand, and really to roll up our sleeves and get beyond kind of nice projects in theory to real due diligence, investment-ready projects that are ready for financing. We need a real pipeline of investment-ready projects. So we got to roll up our sleeves and do that hard homework. And in that context, there are many, many challenges, but I just want to point out 3 brief ones that I think we need to be thinking about and that have been raised actually in the conversations we've had already. The first is that there is a scale challenge, right? Many of these projects are relatively small. They're distributed. Yet capital, if you're a big investor, you need things $25 million, $50 million, $100 million. So there's this challenge of scale, and we need to think about how to aggregate small projects and present them in ways that have lower transaction costs to larger pools of capital, larger investors. This is the same thing that's true in the energy space. In the energy space, the financial system knows how to fund coal plants. They don't know how to fund distributed renewable energy. So there's been a lot of work about how to aggregate, package, and sell. And I think we need to do the same thing when we talk about nature-based solutions. The second challenge is a methodological challenge, a modeling challenge. This gets back to what Breja was just mentioning, which is there is an assumption here that when you protect the upstream catchment, there are significant, measurable, quantifiable downstream water benefits. When you do flood protection, if you invest in the reef, that you can actually quantify what it will mean in terms of shoreline protection, right? You need to be able to quantify these investments in nature. And this is not an easy thing. There's a significant amount of uncertainty. So that is the second challenge we need to think about. And the third and last thing that I think we really need to think about is that when we talk about resilience, a lot of the benefits for resilience are not things that can be easily monetized, right? And so there is going to be some serious public funding that will still be needed. So we cannot assume that the private sector will invest in everything. Not all of these investments will be financially viable. We need public funding. So I'll just close with, recently, I'm sure you've heard in earlier sessions, this is, though, such an important part of the solution. We know forest loss, as you've heard, accounts for only perhaps 10% of the mitigation challenge, but in terms of the solution, over 30, 35, 37% of the solution is from forest and land use. So how we drive financing to these types of solutions is hugely important.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll pass a very quick question to you, because I do want to take at least one comment from the audience, but I think it's been super fascinating here. So listen, many people in the conservation communities are not financiers. So they say, oh, well, we'll just get the private sector to invest in the mangrove, right? Of course, where's the return? So I think the community struggles with identifying the yield. Where will the financial yield come from? Other than municipal bonds, which has a yield, and I'm sure the mayor knows all about muni bonds and so on. Would you say, therefore, that we will need to identify for the vast majority of the financial engineering of those solutions will have, therefore, to include both insurance as well as public as well as private? Do you see this mix being essential, or do you see areas where you could go with private only? And I'm going to give you 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and the answer is it very much depends on the solution or the investment we're talking about, where it is, whether or not the benefits can be easily monetized. But I think I think the thing that I'd like us to be dissuaded from is the expectation that there will be significant inflows of private money on its own for many investments that are primarily about building resilience. Precisely. That it will require some level of public funding. And so the point about blended finance that I know you've had earlier sessions on is a really important theme. We need to think about how to bring in different types of money to account for different types of return and risk. And so that point about sophisticated financial engineering is something that I think we need to invest further in.
No, this is brilliant. Can we please give Manish Babna a round of applause? Thank you. So we have just 5 minutes left, and I think actually it was Sweta who mentioned that she's been working with Wetland International, and I see that Jane Madgwick is in the house. But you unfortunately only get 2 minutes, Jane. But I would like to just hear from you on the kind of work that you've been doing on this whole story around resilience. And I think there is a microphone right up there. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Inga, and some very inspiring examples from the panel already. And yes, Wetlands International is actually working, as mentioned, with Red Cross, but also Deltaris and FAO and engineering companies, with local communities and governments, finding ways to build resilience on the ground. And it's increasingly clear to us and to many others that climate resilience isn't going to happen without actually large-scale investment in safeguarding and restoring wetland ecosystems in the landscape, considering the rising water risks. So I slightly disagree with Manish that with nature-based solutions, we're necessarily looking at small green solutions. We need to really build back in a big way these solutions, and very often not only as green infrastructure, but as grey-green infrastructure. And while there is growing interest in both the public and the private sector in looking at these kind of solutions, there is a major implementation gap. And this is even where, speaking to a point raised by Manish, the benefits can be quantified, and where the approaches have been demonstrated and documented well on a smaller scale. I think we've heard in these presentations some of the things that would help, like really mapping the critical infrastructure, the natural infrastructure in the landscape, and the restoration opportunities. I think this is a fantastic example in El Salvador.
Thank you. Yeah.
So this is something that should be replicated in other countries, and testing innovative solutions, as Brechia was mentioned. But I'd be interested, if there's time from the panel, to hear what they think would be the critical next steps to bridge the confidence gap, because there's a lack of confidence even in tried and tested nature-based solutions. So what would make the difference?
Thank you very much, Jane, and challenging us. I don't think, actually, in Manish's defense, I don't think he said they were all small. I think he said that oftentimes it is a question of aggregating and making something into large, but very, very helpful. And there is that gap. Look, we're going to do a one-breath kind of a final remark from each one of us, each one of you, because time is short and there is another session thereafter. But you've listened to one another, and it's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. So, Madam Minister, having heard all of this, and it has to be a sort of one breath because otherwise we'll be kicked out. But Madam Minister, having heard all of this, and then I'll come to Manish and we'll go down the line, any reflections that you have for us? Because you in El Salvador are doing something unique and very tough and difficult things, but it has the potential to show something extraordinary. Any reflections as we close out?
Yes, it has been a fantastic roundtable, actually. I learned a lot. And what I realized, that I have more challenges than I think, that I used to think. And yes, we protect biodiversity for the people, not by the people. I mean, no. We protect biodiversity because of the ecosystem services. We need money, but we need to change the financial sector. You're right. We need to work with them. And Mayor, I mean, I want to learn about, I want to learn more about your experience. And of course, humanitarian sector have to work together with programs like our program, ecosystem program, because we are doing because we want to reduce risks. So, I mean, it was fantastic, and I have to say that, Inga, your question has been extraordinary. I don't know how you do, but it's
you guys made it all happen.
A fantastic facilitation.
Thank you.
But I'm a little bit more worried that I can't.
Oh no! Oh no!
No worried, but inspired.
Okay.
I have a lot of work to do.
No, this is fabulous. Manish, any final thoughts that you have?
So I think it's just really about
Thank you.
Innovation to get to scale. I mean, there's an urgency. We need to move fast. There is the potential is huge, and we've just started moving in that direction, but we don't have much time. So the point about innovation in the design of instruments, innovation in who we need to partner with, innovation in deal structuring, just hugely important. We need to invest more in there. Try, learn, figure out what works, what doesn't work, and move from there.
Perfect. Bridget, please. Any final reflections from your side?
Yeah, I sort of agree, but I would like to say learning together, accelerate knowledge development. Developing guidelines helps a lot. Following up, evaluation of what we're doing is not what we always do. So monitoring builds trust. Building trust means it works towards investment. And I think on the higher level, we need financing strategies for this, for sure.
Superb. Mr. Mayor, please. You wowed us all with your presentation.
No, thanks for all. I learned a lot from this panel today. I think I'm facing challenges, but from what I heard here, I think I'll change my mind a little bit and do more. So we need resources, but what we have to do is all kind of infrastructure we are going to bring on must also bring a resource by itself for maintenance. Thank you.
That's brilliant. And please, Suada, any reflections from you as we close out?
Yeah, so a lot of great inputs all from the panel. And I think just the reflection I have is that hearing from everybody, for us to truly reduce the risks to disasters, we have to invest in ecosystem management and restoration. And we need to work in terms of like timescales, in terms of projecting and thinking about the future. So truly, everybody has a role to play in terms of risk reduction. Yeah.
Well, look, I didn't need to summarize because I just took the lazy route and I got everybody else to summarize. But really, I think what we have had today has been an absolutely stellar conversation by superb people who are living this day in, day out. Each comes with a slightly different on-ramp to the conversation, but that's what made it so enriching. I do apologize deeply, but we did spend about 25 minutes on the first two brilliant panelists, obviously His Excellency President Ramen Desau, as well as the Director General of FAO. So I didn't do my job well enough because I didn't manage to get questions from the audience. I beg your indulgence and your forgiveness for that. But please give this brilliant panel a round of applause. Thank you very much.